All right. Who would like to ask the first question?
I don't have a question to ask at this time, but I guess I'd like to get started a little bit, if that's all right. This is Tammy, and I'm the director here at the Commission on Aging. And I just want to say that, this has been an incredibly tough time for everybody. And I appreciate the guidance that we've received from the state. It's been helpful in really helping us protect the vulnerable elderly through this whole pandemic. We've gotten a lot of direction from the State Office on Aging, not quite as much from our area agency on aging, but we do appreciate, the guidance that we have gotten. And that's really been our goal through this whole pandemic, is to keep our older adults safe. And Gail was saying that she still hasn't gone to the grocery store, and we like to hear that, because that's been our goal, is to keep people safe, especially those who are still in their home and don't have somebody else to look out for them. So I'll just throw that out there to start.
So can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kind of the reverse format I think you were hoping for. When it comes to our shut-ins, how successful are we reaching them if they want a vaccination?
That's a great question, Julie, because I think it's still one that's not entirely clear in Berry County. I've heard from other counties that direction is clearer. I know that it's on the radar screen with our health department, and I know that they have made some provisions, but we haven't had much clear communication on exactly what those provisions are. We know we have been in good partnership with the health department. So if we were to come across somebody that needed a home vaccine, we would be able to reach out to them. But up until this point, we have really been encouraging people to go to the clinics, and the health department has been coming out to the vehicle to service the more homebound and vulnerable. So they've handled it that way. I do know that they're trying to address those who really truly can't get out of the home, but in the meantime, we've tried to approach it that way.
So you don't have much of a waiting list then, in terms of individuals who would like to get vaccinated but find it difficult to get out?
We do not. We do not.
Okay. Well, that's
and
good.
We actually had a contract with the health department to do the calling, the outreach to the non-tech folks. So we started out with the 65 and over population, making lots and lots and lots of calls. We spent, the better part of February and March doing that. And then as soon as things opened up to the 60 plus population, we had fewer people to outreach because more of them were connected via email. And, in retrospect, the more successful outreach to everybody rather than email would have been text message. But I don't think anybody ever figured that out until it was too late. But once we hit the 60 and over population, not only were more people connected via email, but also that by that point, they had gone to other providers and gotten their shots. So.
Got it. All right, that's helpful. Thank you.
Good.
Well, and don't you feel that the Meals on Wheels people would also be a very good way to get in contact with the homebound?
Yes, and that's a good point, Gail, because from the onset, we really we tried really hard to communicate with our home care staff and our Meals on Wheels staff to be that voice to them, telling them, hey, if you need a shot, all you have to do is give me your name and I'll turn it in, or call the office. So they knew early on that their connection, if they weren't email proficient, if they weren't email users, they knew early on through those Meals on Wheels drivers and those home care aides that all they had to do was call here and we could schedule the shots for them. And we actually drove a few people in for their shots as well. But the failure in that system is that if they're not a Meals on Wheels client or a
Right.
home care client, then we have to figure out how to reach them in other manner.
Mhm.
Do you
But
have a
you-
waiting list when it comes to meals?
We do not. We do
Didn't
for
think
home
so.
care. Yeah, we
Okay.
do for home care, but we don't for Meals on Wheels. And part of that is because we're millage funded. And so the board makes a commitment to not use a waiting list. We just serve everybody. And we're lucky being a rural county, we're lucky that people donate for their meals. So that program income goes in and helps, buy more meals as well.
But I know it was tough to get drivers prior to the pandemic. So how has it been since?
For drivers, again, we're so blessed in Berry County. We have I've got the list here somewhere because I'm going to send thank you notes to them. And Calley retired from our nutrition program. Calley, who's also in on the call. Our volunteers really stuck with us through the whole pandemic. We actually hired a new Meals on Wheels driver during pandemic. So we tend to pay a little more. So we're more successful in getting employees for those sorts of jobs. But really, it was the volunteers that stepped up to the plate and said, nope, I'll do it. I'll stay with the program.
And I know you know this from talking to other partners throughout the state, but I'm so glad that in your remarks you continue to recognize special Berry is, because there aren't a lot of places in the state that will step up and fill gaps as much as Berry County. They
Yeah,
see a need and they tend to step right up to the plate and take care of it. And that initiative has just really addressed so many community problems over the years.
sure. Mhm.
So
You know-
I like some of the direction that this conversation has taken, because I wanted to ask about, of course, the digital divide. And what we see in Berry County a lot of times is not only an access issue that people are not able to get internet, but there's also a training piece that we're missing as well. And the pandemic really has brought that to light with the seniors as where we are at with that. And I'm hoping that in the future, we're going to see more training and outreach and things like that to get more seniors online if they choose to be online. Of course, sometimes I feel like we're ramming it down their throats, but I would really like to see that move forward. And I was kind of wondering, do you know where we're at with broadband access and affordability and that type of thing for internet?
That's a great question. And you're right. The last year has really raised awareness, I think, that it's not available to as many as we thought. And frankly, the data that we had at the state level wasn't particularly helpful. So when the federal government collects information on internet access, they actually do it by census block. And if one person in the census block somehow has high-speed internet, they just check the box and say, yeah, it's there. No, not necessarily at all. And so I live in Portland, which is a bedroom community between Lansing and Grand Rapids. And you would assume, at least I would, that some of those bedroom communities have drawn people for lots of reasons, including internet access. Not the case. So we live in the country. We chose that lifestyle because we prefer it. But when the pandemic hit, of course, my husband and I went to all video calls all the time, and they were miserable. It was almost impossible to have. So my husband would hop in his car and drive closer to the expressway to get a stronger cell phone signal, and would just sit in his car for hours a day talking. And I just went off video because it uses less bandwidth. Otherwise, I sounded like R2D2 because your audio gets so broken up. But we have people working from home. We have kids trying to learn from home. And certainly now we have families who are only able to connect electronically. That in-person option has been removed for safety reasons. And now that the vaccine is out and we're starting to see some normalcy return, but we're certainly not there yet. So all that to say, yes, it's been heightened. I know there is a project that has to go through state land that is somewhat delayed. We're working on it. There's also a federal component there that we're working with Congressman Meyer's office, trying to do everything we can to get the government to cut the red tape. But the end story, I think, is going to be that we really need to look at our smaller providers to help us out. I don't think you're going to see the AT&Ts and the Verizons of the world want to worry about rural broadband. And so the Berry County Telephones and Tri-County Electric is a co-op that has also started offering fiber throughout part of my district. It's the smaller providers who are really going to raise the bar when it comes to rural internet access. And we just passed a bill this term that would help provide some tax relief to providers who are willing to come in and set up that equipment. The governor didn't like that approach, so we're back in talks about how else we can support and kind of incentivize individuals to bring in that offering. And then as well, we've got currently within the budget $150 million in grants to providers who want to make that expansion as well. But you know, it's in some sense, we're never going to go back to the way we were. I think a number of businesses have figured out that people can work from home and do so responsibly. And people figured out that, hey, if I don't have to spend 10 hours a week commuting, this is really great. And at the same token, there are other states who never have snow days per se for schools. They simply declare today is a virtual learning day. We're not going to worry about the safety of the buses on the roads. All the kids stay home, you know, open your laptop and start your work. Well, we have a number of school districts who still find that very problematic. Trying to think of one of the charitable organizations just announced recently locally that they were going to provide hotspots because those are still so necessary for working and learning. It's not coming to me, but anyway, it continues to be an absolute need in our neck of the woods, as well as, you know, stretched up through the northern part of Michigan as well. And it will be a focus of the legislature going forward. I think it's one thing that we agree on. We just have to figure out what the best mechanism is to enable those who are willing to help us out.
Thank you.
Sort of related to that topic, I'll also throw out, not only is access difficult for our seniors that we're trying to do virtual programming with, you know, we have an issue with trickle down state and federal funding that gets caught at the area agency level. There was no way that we had enough money in our agency budget to do anything from home. We have one employee who is able to work from home on a laptop that the county gave to us. Agency-wide with 32 employees, we have 2 laptops. I'm using one of them right now. You know, our phone service, our phone system is outdated and wouldn't be able to accommodate work from home. We don't have a budget to purchase cell phones for the staff to work from home. So for us, it wasn't even a question of being able to do it because there was no funding available to us to try to build that infrastructure, and especially that type of infrastructure that would meet our HIPAA requirements. So we all just you know, other than the one employee, we've all just been working from the office since day one. But again, that's sort of a lack of trickle down, that those dollars get caught at the area agency level and don't come down to the providers. And I've heard that, you know, we have the other COA directors, we have bi-monthly phone calls, and that's a, you know, frustration for all of us. And I know that's kind of a super focused complaint, but just take it as an observation, please.
That all kind of ties in with our infrastructure being a little bit behind, you know. I have a question, and that is, in some of the voting bills that are proposed, there are places where they want, in order to get your absentee ballot, you have to send in a copy of your photo ID. And that becomes really, really hard for some of the seniors. You know, it's so nice that they have the absentee ballots for them, that they still get to vote, which, you know, is their right and that, but it would be very difficult for them to have to, you know, hand in a copy of that because, you know, maybe they don't have a printer, or they don't have someone who can make a copy for them, or that sort of thing. And how do you feel about some of the bills that are coming, that have started through?
Did we lose Julie?
No, I'm asking her to unmute. She is muted.
Oh.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
Sorry, was I talking to myself?
Yeah, you were. I'm sorry.
Insert captions here. Um, that bill is part of the Senate package, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like if and when it gets to the House. But for my part, I want to make sure that we have voter integrity so that I'm able to assure the people I work for that it's a one person, one vote system. But by the same token, we have to balance that with, let's not set up barriers to voting. And we have a good system in place in terms of, we're comparing, I say we, election workers and clerk staff are comparing signatures, both when you request a ballot, they have your signature online, they look at your ballot application. If it looks legitimate, they send you the ballot. And then of course you sign the outside of the envelope after you vote and you send it back and they examine that signature as well. That's supposed to be the safety mechanism. If we start asking people to send in their driver's licenses, to be honest with you, I'm a bit concerned about identity theft. But also, as you mentioned, it can be a barrier because not everybody has a copier at home. So what we've learned is that some states actually focus much more on training for clerk staff than Michigan does. And I think that's something we should look into. So if I was working in a clerk's office and felt the pressure of trying to figure out if somebody's signature looked as the same as the one on file, you know, our signatures change. And there can be a question as to, is that really so-and-so's autograph or not? So there is an FBI branch that specifically will come in and train election workers to give them confidence in how to identify whether or not a signature is truly an individual's. And I would much rather go that route and work on the training component than set up additional ID requirements.
I agree with that.
I do too. I think Gail's absolutely right that it would be a real impediment to our isolated older adults. Yeah, good idea.
Any other comments or questions?
We do have a significant amount of one-time funding coming in both to the state and to your local governments. And I think the challenge for all of us is setting up success based on those dollars. We don't want to create a system that can't be sustained. So the one-time funding, we are looking at things like, you know, rural broadband. I think that is absolutely key. Maybe some infrastructure improvements as well, because a number of our municipalities are in charge of making substantial improvements to their water lines in the coming years. But if we don't offer grants, then the only way they can do that is to raise the rates of their consumers. So I think there's a potential to see some success coming out of this. I personally worry about all the spending that we're doing as a government, but we need to make wise choices. And so we're trying to do the same thing with school funding in terms of how can we support schools who want to offer night classes or a summer class, additional learning opportunities for students who may have fallen behind. And I do think there will be a long-term increased need for mental health spending, not just in our schools, but probably in all aspects of life. We were not meant to be as isolated as we've had to be. And in the process of trying to protect public health, in some cases, we've seen some agony, whether it be economic, emotional, or educational. And so those are pieces that we need to continue to support as best we can. We've heard from our long-term care facilities that the number of residents that they have is significantly down. So understandably, families are hesitant to send their loved ones for fear that the doors might be closed again and they won't have access. These are some pretty critical issues that are understandable, but there's an impact in terms of, can these places keep their doors open? Can they continue to employ those who are on staff? We are just starting to understand some of the implications of the last year. And going forward, obviously, we're not out of this yet.
I think you're right on the money regarding additional funding for mental health services. I think that's going to be critical to any sort of recovery, and that's all ages. That's, we of course see it most prevalently with our older adults, but I was telling them before you came on the call, we had 15 people exercising in the parking lot this morning, and it was cold, and I don't think that they really were there to exercise. I think that they were there because they got to see other people and talk. And yeah, that isolation has been brutal.
Now,
Absolutely.
there's quite a bit of COVID money coming into our county and into, that our commissioners will decide on. What can we do to help the COA get a larger portion of that? Any ideas?
Well, as soon as I heard about the money, Gail,
Hey,
I put in my bid, thinking broadly with infrastructure that it would be a good opportunity, to peel off part of that for a new building for us, and a new building that we could build in those sorts of tools that would help bridge that digital divide. But I guess my concern, the figure that was thrown out was $12 million. And I know that broadband is certainly going to be one of the things that they will look at, which
right.
I firmly support. But I hope that the county will have some conversation about, ideas within the framework of what's allowed under the funding. I hope that the commissioners won't just arbitrarily decide what's best. I hope that they'll go out and invite some conversation, among the departments and among the townships, instead of just deciding, oh, this is what we're going to use it for. I don't know, Julie, you probably have some other thoughts on that as well.
I suspect they'll do a budget hearing on it, but I have not talked to any of the commissioners directly. And my advice to you would have been what you've already done, which is to be, prompt and upfront about the needs that the Commission on Aging has and the ways that those dollars could be best used. There's usually a long line that forms when money is available.
Oh, sure. Sure. Yeah,
So
I
we're
think
at time.
there's Go ahead.
We're a top 10 state when it comes to aging demographics too. So, you're in a business that is only going to continue to increase, right?
Mhm.
The needs of our seniors will actually increase as time goes by, not decrease. And so when we talk about infrastructure, we have to be prepared for the continuing number of individuals who are going to retire here in this state.
And because of that demographic,
You're muted.
there we
There-
go. Am I there now?
You're there now.
Because of that demographic, there's more and more and more scam activity that's taking place. And I'm glad you mentioned that earlier, Julie, because that's something that we just have to stay so vigilant on. And we've been getting good communication from the state, and it appears as though the Attorney General's office is prosecuting more elderly scammers. So I'm glad to see all of that taking place, because I think as our population ages, that's just going to get worse. I'm just incredulous at what the new scams are. Every day we get a notice of something new in that regard.
Yeah, the ideas are creative but horrible, right? It's
Yeah.
just heartbreaking.
Yeah, the
I
latest.
would never be able to come up with that many ways.
I know it. They've
Yes.
gone beyond the Nigerian prince stories, and the
Mhm.
latest one now evidently is about scamming people, not just seniors, but scamming people on those CARES Act dollars for funerals. You know, that's just they're fast.
Mhm.
That's outrageous.
Mhm.
Tammy, what is the one thing that you would like to see the state do to help out the Commission on Aging?
Well, I think, you know, I hate to reduce it to a dollar sign, but really we do truly need more funding at our level for technology. You know, we have never been able to, you know, I'm really concerned about HIPAA compliance and the vulnerability of our system right here at the Commission on Aging. And you know, it's well beyond training, because we train staff, but if you don't have the firewalls and, you know, the protections in place and the proper equipment, it's just really hard to make sure that you're living up to what you need to do. So from my perspective, it's getting more dollars to us for the technology, not just for ourselves, but for our seniors. You know, we have tried for, well, since way before Coralie left, we've tried to get a new data system, you know, but the state doesn't have one that they use for older adult services. So everybody's out there scrambling, and there are 2 or 3 big leaders in that field. But you're looking, you know, at a buy-in of $60,000 to $75,000 just for the buy-in, and then you've got the annual costs beyond that. And we just don't have that kind of money available to us. You know, when we get $25,000, we buy a truck so we can deliver Meals on Wheels. We can't put it into the technology.
Sure.
That's a great question. Thank you.
We are trying to do some work with regard to medical expenses as well. So that is one that we see increasing, obviously, across the board, regardless of what your age is. But there was a 14 bill package that came out of the House a little over a month ago now, And my bill in that is attempting to address a third-party administrator that lies between the pharmacists and the health plans. And so when we all walk into the pharmacy and we're told, this is, your doctor may have asked for drug A, but drug B is actually covered. So, usually they offer us drug B. How is that chosen? That list of preferred drugs is called a formulary, and it's designed by a pharmacy benefit manager, which is that third-party administrator between the health plans and the pharmacists. And they really end up making the decision as to what's available to us. It's not our physician. It's not necessarily the drug that's the cheapest, that has the least side effects, or that is the most effective. There has developed a pay-to-play system whereby drug manufacturers know that they have to offer money to these third-party administrators in order to get their drug first on the list. It's a nefarious system, to be honest with you. And our pharmacists are suffering as well. Our small-town pharmacists get audits that stretch back months, if not years, and they're tip of the iceberg audits. So if you find one mistake, the third party just assumes that you always made that mistake. And so they continue to pull back funding. It's just very hard from an access level for our pharmacists to hold on and continue to operate. And you'll see more and more of them have, gift shops and what have you, just trying to provide some steady income because they never know how much is going to be deducted from one month to the other. So that bill is really trying to create a fairer playing system with the idea that there's a lot of money circulating within the medical healthcare system and a lot of back scratching. So some of the money that comes from the manufacturers and goes to the third party system may go back to an employer funded health plan or directly to the health insurance provider, but it's not reaching the consumer. And so let's take some of the revenue that is circulating and make sure we reach the end user, because we could sure use some relief. Now, ideally, we would see this addressed at the federal level. We don't like to think about 50 different states creating, say, 40 different expectations for a third-party administrator, because that's going to arguably drive up their administrative expenses as well. But since we haven't seen the feds move on it, we are trying to move here at the state level, empowered by a recent Supreme Court decision that made it clear that states could regulate in this area. There are 3 of these third-party administrators that control over 80% of the national market. And usually states can only control an entity if it operates within their borders. But the Supreme Court did clarify that we can regulate and license these entities, even though they're multi-state operations. So we're going to try.
Have you had a chance to talk with Hastings Pharmacy about that at all?
I don't think I have yet. So Lake Odessa, Middleville twice, actually. Nashville a little bit, but I should reach out to Hastings.
I just asked because I had an interesting situation come up with Hastings Pharmacy. I have Blue Cross as my carrier through the county. And I had a call from Hastings Pharmacy that a particular drug that I was taking was getting reimbursed to the pharmacy at less than what the pharmacy had to pay for it. So they were asking me to go to a different pharmacy if I could for a couple of months until they could negotiate a better price. And I thought, what a bitter pill to swallow, haha, for a local pharmacy to have to send me to Walgreens, to get the medication that just because they couldn't afford to keep losing money on me.
Sure. And, the contracts that come from these large entities, they're take it or leave it, right? There's no negotiating. They can go back and try to do it on that item by item basis. But for the most part, we hear heartbreaking stories like that over and over again, or there may be a particularly expensive prescription that ends up being the target of the audit, right? Because they're hoping to find a mistake there. And in some cases, there are those drugs that are just losing commodities, if you will, for the pharmacy right out of the bat.
Well, that sounds like a great bill. be anxious to hear how that goes.
Well, I've managed to upset just about everybody in the medical industry, like the lobby corps.
See, that's a
So
good thing.
Yeah, then you know you're doing something right.
I definitely stirred up a hornet's nest on this one.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just have to believe we can do better for the people that we serve.
Mhm.
Bless you.
Thank you. Hmm.
So Julie, can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
I know that you're term limited out of this term. What are you looking forward to doing in the future?
That's a great question. I have to decide what I want to be when I grow up all over again. It's like a second chance. I have not settled on a path yet, to be honest with you. I jokingly tell this story, and this is a true story. So as I've already mentioned, I live in Portland, and pre-pandemic, we used to have this festival, and I volunteered at one point to serve beer for a local brewery, and they said I did a great job, and I would have an offer as a bartender at any time. So my joke is that my fallback plan is I'm just going to bartend when this is all over. But truly, I'm not sure where I go from here. I definitely have a lot of passions in terms of, I have a child on the autism spectrum, and she has really opened my eyes as to what a disability really is in terms of what I thought it was and how capable those individuals are. So I would love to advocate for people like her and pave the way for a safer, brighter future. Everybody always asks me about Senate. I shouldn't say everybody. I get often asked about Senate. I don't have an answer there because the lines are being redrawn and we don't even know what district I would live in and who else would be interested. So that's kind of a tricky question, but I never entered the House thinking I wanted to be senator next. I don't appreciate people who enter public service simply because they want to climb the ladder. I think it should be about serving in the job that you have now. So to be determined. Good question.
Okay. We really appreciate all the town halls that you have.
I appreciate the feedback. I mean, really hearing from people is the only way that I can do a better job of representing them. So their time and insight is just critical.
I have a few questions.
Absolutely.
Okay. One is about the direct care workers increase, and I know it ends at the end of September. Is there anybody trying to get it to keep going in the next fiscal year?
That's a great question. Yes, those talks are in the works. I know my appropriations chair in the House, Chair Whiteford, who has the DHHS budget, is making the case that we simply need to pay these organizations better and let them decide how big of an increase they can give their workers. It's kind of unusual for the state to set wages for one certain component or job. So it makes more sense for us to do a better job of reimbursing across the board.
And will it be across the board so that it's not just for the My Choice waiver workers, but any agency that sends, direct care workers in homes?
Sure. So our budget impacts only individuals who are on Medicaid in some form. So Medicare would be federal, and then if you have privately insured individuals, they would also, their wages would be based on whatever the insurance company or the contractor that works for the insurance company sets. So we are specifically, go ahead.
What about the ASA programs?
I would have to look into that. I don't think I have an answer off the top of my head.
But that, I mean, those are important programs too. You know,
Sure.
keeping everyone at home as opposed to in a nursing home.
Sure. Boy, I would think those fit, and I've probably got people on the call that know more than I do.
And I'm also curious about talking about the broadband. Does anybody know anything about the AARP Connect America? And is that any way or shape or form? Could that be helpful?
That I have not heard of having a connection with the state government. I
Turn in
don't
on
happen.
Wednesday. No, Thursday. No, it's Wednesday's a broadband day for Michigan Week. So that we might find out more, but I would think that would be a good thing to be connected with.
We are finding that in a number of areas, public-private partnerships are the best way to go. So you're right, that is definitely worth consideration.
Is that working in conjunction with Michigan Connects? What Corley's talking about?
I have no idea.
I think it is. I think it is connected in some way. Because
And-
they've
and-
had a big initiative in Michigan to try to reach more people with broadband and definitely decrease the digital divide. So I think there is an initiative right now happening in Michigan. And like you said, Corley, we'll probably know a little bit more about that on Wednesday.
Right. And that would be a good thing to, to connect.
Absolutely.
And it would be truly wonderful if all direct care workers receive that increase, because you get better workers with better pay, I do believe.
Well, and there's always an organizational expense, even though it's hard to quantify when you have turnover, right? So the retraining of individuals
You're
is
right.
expensive.
Yes,
So if you can attract and keep talent, there is a cost savings component to that as well.
absolutely.
I actually prefer the thought behind just reimbursing entities more, the aging services organizations more for the services, because I know that the direct care premium causes some resentment among other staff members who don't receive it. And I know from other COA directors that it's also caused problems with county entities that are within a pay scale, where some of them have been told that they can't even pay that direct worker premium, even though it's reimbursed, because it's not a part of the county wage scale. So I know it's caused some difficulty in several different areas based on those things. How would you feel if you were a Meals on Wheels driver and you found out that a home care aide was getting a $2 an hour premium? Or if you were a maintenance worker and found out that a home care aide was getting a $2 an hour premium. So it is unusual for the state to sort of dictate those wage increases to us, especially to sort of cherry pick areas.
And they're going in the same houses.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Sure.
Do we have any other questions? Representative Calley, do you want to give us some closing remarks? We've taken up a lot of your time today, and I truly appreciate you doing this with us.
Have you arrived yet?
I have not, but I'm in a situation where I can pull over. So
Are we there yet?
Yeah,
right?
That's what I was going for.
So thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Great questions, and the fact that you are interested in asking them and pursuing answers is just critical to government. If we don't have people involved, we'll definitely not make decisions that reflect your needs and wants. So thank you. Sorry about the format. I did not intend upon driving while I was doing this, but actually women multitask, right?
That's right.
So transportation for my darling child fell through. So I had to go pick up this beautiful lady.
Hi.
And that's why I stared at I-96 more than I did make eye contact with you. And I apologize for that. But thank you for bearing with me.
She didn't make a peep.
She just got in. So
Oh, okay.
she's been with us for about 5 minutes. And to be honest with you,
Okay.
she's used to me being on the phone a lot, the poor kid. So she's very patient. But again, the last year has been just so difficult for so many people for a variety of reasons. And thank you especially to Commission on Aging for helping some of our most vulnerable, certainly with information and encouragement and meals and socialization and more information, because it kept changing, right? For a while there, it felt like it was changing day by day. And so we've learned a lot. I think we know better how to go forward, but we can't do it unless we go forward together. So I'm indebted for your involvement as well as your time and expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you're awesome for working us into your schedule, even though the ride disappeared and everything.
If we do this again, I promise I'll be seated.
Oh, well, you were
Stationary.
seated.
Well, I was not stationary though.
I thought at first you would have a chauffeur and you'd be in the back seat.
No, I'm the chauffeur.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks again,
Yes, thank
Julie.
you.
And what
Thank you
good
for the
modeling for your
opportunity.
daughter too.
Well, being related to me definitely teaches patience. So nothing else. She's learned patience.
See ya.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Okay,
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.